Darkness rises, and light to meet it.
The Force, it calls to you. Who are you?
Hey there, welcome back to the People of the Free Gift Podcast. This is Jason, and today we're going to be continuing our journey through the Gospels, and we're going to be in John chapter 12, and we are in that last week of Jesus' ministry, but as we've seen, that last week is really the last half of most of the four Gospels. And so you see we're only in John chapter 12 out of 21 chapters, even though we are in that last week. And so we are going to jump into a teaching of Jesus in response to some Greek God-fearers who are wanting to meet Jesus and to encounter him. And so let's go ahead and jump right in. If you want to be entered into a drawing to win a gift card of your choice for $20, here's how you do it. You click on the subscribe button, as you're also going to need to share this video on social media. That's all you have to do. And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. That's John 12:20. And this introduces us to a group that we're going to see a lot in the book of Acts, and they are known as the God-fearers. They are those Gentiles, meaning non-Jewish people, who identified themselves with the God of Israel. They weren't full converts to Judaism. They were still remaining as their identity, but they would be kind of in the synagogues in that back row. They were listening, and they were basing a lot of their life and their worldview even upon the message of this God, Yahweh, of the Old Testament. And so this is from that group, and they were coming up to worship at the feast. And I think this is really interesting that, they're going into Jerusalem. They're going for, Passover, which is coming up soon. And their intent is to worship Yahweh at the feast of Passover in Jerusalem. And yet they're Greeks. And so this really represents a group of people that may be in your life and my life that are not technically believers. They're not Christians. They wouldn't identify themselves as Christians, but they believe in God, and they actually fear God. They base their life off of the existence of God, and even to some extent, maybe even the Christian God. Maybe it's Christian virtues, Christian characteristics, the Christian message, but they have not placed their faith solely and completely in Jesus Christ. Maybe it's more of a moral code for them, but that's who this group really represents. And so we can really take inventory in our life as to, who are those people, God? Who are the people that respect you, who fear you, but they just don't understand the gospel? They've never really been presented with the opportunity to place their faith in Jesus Christ, because that would be a really primed, pumped audience for us. If we figured out who those people are, we could start praying for them, we could start reaching out to them, inviting them, and then we could have those people come into our family, the family of God, and our church families, and that would be an amazing thing. So let's see how the apostles respond to this. So it says in John 12:21, the same came therefore to Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and desired him, saying, Sir, we would see Jesus. Now, that's a great open door, hey, we want to know more about Jesus. Have you ever had anybody in your life actually come up to you and just ask you that question, like, hey, you're a Christian, right? I want to know more about Jesus. That's basically the opportunity that's right in front of them, but they're Greeks. And that's the big, elephant in the room right now. So how do they deal with that? So it says Philip came and told Andrew, and again Andrew and Philip told Jesus. And so, Philip's like, I don't know what to do. He goes to Andrew, and Andrew and Philip together, they go to Jesus, kind of like strength in numbers, right? But here's an interesting thing about Philip is that he doesn't show up very often. He's not one of the prominent of the 12. He's not a Peter, and even Paul, the apostle born at a due time, kind of takes the show when he comes into the picture. But, he's not a Peter, he's not a John, he's not a James, but he's not even an Andrew, right? But Philip, every time he shows up, he's introducing somebody to Jesus. And I think that's really, really cool. That's like, what a thing to be known for. Like, hey, this guy's kind of low key. He's in the background. You don't hear much about him. He's not very prominent. You've never heard his name. But every time I see this guy, he's introducing somebody to Jesus. What a thing to be known for. I think that's a really cool thing. I wish that's a great thing to pray for. Hey, God, can I be more like Philip? So going on to verse 23. And Jesus answered them, saying, the hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. And so we have this phrase that is recurring, particularly in the Gospel of John. And every time before this, it's not the time yet. The hour has not yet come. Why are you bothering me? The hour has not yet come. And here we have Jesus saying, the hour has come. And what is that hour? That hour is specifically talking about the time in which Jesus, the Messiah, was going to be crucified, buried, and risen again from the dead. That's really what it is he's referring to. And it's referring to the purpose for which he came. Jesus said it a number of different ways. I didn't come for the sick, or I didn't come for those who are healthy. I came for the sick. I came to give my life as a ransom for many. I lay down my life for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. Okay, he said it a number of different ways. But now he's specifically saying to his apostles, the hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Now, the Son of Man is a reference to Daniel chapter 7. And it's a vision that was given to Daniel in which you have these kingdoms of the world, and then you have one like the Son of Man who comes to the Ancient of Days, and he's presented with a kingdom that's never going to end. Okay? And so Jesus says, the hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified. So in the context that they're used to hearing that statement, and in the context of the original prophecy of the Son of Man, then you would think that what Jesus is actually pointing to is the moment in which he is going to step up on the throne of his father David and rule and reign in a kingdom that's never going to end from Jerusalem over the entire world. Now, we talked about last week how that is going to happen. Okay, and that kingdom is going to come, and Jesus is going to come again. He is going to sit on the throne of his father David. He is going to rule and reign for 1,000 years, and some of us will have the privilege of ruling and reigning with us. Okay, we talked about that, but that was not the purpose of his first coming. And that was a huge thing. That was a problem for them to sort out is, there's these prophecies that talk about a suffering Messiah, and then there's prophecies about a reigning Messiah. And of course, if you have an option between those two, you choose the reigning Messiah, especially if you have political issues that you would like to see resolved amongst your people. And so that's the Messiah that they kind of sided with, and that was the majority view. This is who the Messiah is going to be. He's going to be the Son of Man who's going to reign on his throne. And Jesus throws out, hey, the hour is here that the Son of Man should be glorified. But Jesus is talking about his death. And Jesus said this another way. He says, in John chapter 3, one of the most famous verses, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever should believe in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Okay? But before that, in that conversation with Nicodemus, he says that just as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Okay? And that lifting up is, very picturesque, especially if you go back to the analogy that he gave, the serpent in the wilderness in the book of Numbers that Moses lifted up. And anybody who looked at this would be healed of the serpent bites that were, plaguing and killing some of them. Anybody who looks at the symbol of sin being judged, raised on a pole, will be healed. And Jesus says, just like that, the Son of Man must be lifted up. Now, this word lifted up is also the word for exalted, that the Son of Man must be exalted through dying on a cross. And Jesus is saying basically the same thing here, that hours come that the Son of Man should be glorified. How is he going to be glorified? He's going to be glorified through his death and his burial and resurrection. Now, if that's not clear yet, it's going to become more clear as he goes on. Verse 24, verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abides alone. But if it die, it brings forth much fruit. And Jesus introduces a very powerful illustration, and one that applies to you and to me just as much as it did to him. And he's saying this, if you just take a, kernel of corn, right? Well, it's corn of wheat, so it's actually, a grain of wheat. And by itself, it doesn't, it abides alone. Right? It's by itself. This is all it is. It can produce a little bit of food, but not much. But that same grain of wheat, if it goes into the ground and it dies and it's buried, then it will rise and bear much fruit. And entire grain fields can become out of one grain of wheat. And so Jesus is using that. And so here's where he makes it clear. He says, I by myself, I might be able to do all these miracles. I might be able to teach great sermons. I might be able to, be an encouragement and cast vision. And that's great. But if I die, then out of that will come much fruit. And we are 2,000 years into the fruit that that Christianity and the message of Jesus has brought into the world. And, I just heard about a new book that's called, Unimaginable. And the premise of the book is just to, what would have happened if Jesus had never come on the scene, and if Christianity had never been born. And it's just, the interesting premise, the chaos and anarchy and all the horror and just the absence of blessings that has been brought into the world, socially, medically, technologically, just theologically, all sorts of things that have been brought into the world through the Christian message. And so Jesus, is telling the truth here. But if Jesus didn't die and he didn't rise again from the dead, there's no gospel. There's no forgiveness of sins. There's no eternal life. There is no Christianity. There is no gospel. And so that's the biggest impact if Jesus doesn't die. But here's the amazing truth, is that Paul uses this in 1 Corinthians 15, and he talks about how a seed goes into the ground as in one form, but then it comes out in another form.
And he uses that to talk about our resurrection bodies. And the same John, the same Apostle John, he says in 1 John 3:2, he says, brothers, it has not yet been revealed what we shall be like, but we do know this, that when he comes we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. That's 1 John 3:2. And that is an amazing, amazing reality, that we will have the privilege of becoming like him in his resurrection. No sin, no pain, no death, no any of that, no limitations that we have in this life. Fruit only comes through death. So that's the first of the countercultural messages that Jesus is going to bring in this passage. And so let's go on to the second. Verse 25, he that loves his life shall lose it, and he that hates his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. And this is kind of a weird thing. Like, is Jesus actually saying that we're supposed to hate our life? Like, while we're in this world and in this life and in these bodies, like we're supposed to hate our life and just kind of constantly look for that pie in the sky promise. And, as some people say, they're so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. Is that what Jesus is saying? No, this word hate actually is more of like a word of comparison. And he's basically saying that, like he says at the front, he who loves his life shall lose it. And he that hates his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. So it's the value, it's a value. Where are your priorities? Where in reference, in comparison, if you take what we get out of this life versus what we get out of the next life, and what our life before Christ and our life after Christ. And if you think, if you compare those two, he says that our life before Christ becomes of so little value in comparison to our life after Christ that it's, as if we hate this life and we love this life. Okay. And, it's just, it reflects how it changes your value system, what you value as important, how it changes your time, how it changes how you spend your money, how it changes your character, how it changes your relationships, how it changes the way that you view your job, you view your family, you view your possessions. All of these things are a reflection of, and even how you view your own physical life. Do you try and keep your physical life going at the expense of following the will of God? Are you about safety? Are you giving into fear? Are you about anxiety and those types of things? Are you held back by your possessions? Are you held back by trying to preserve your life? Are you held back because you fear different things? Or you value this world and what it has to offer over what God has to offer? That's what he's talking about. So verse 26, third countercultural idea is, if any man serves me, let him follow me. And where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. So honor comes through service. Okay, we think of honor coming through, like we need to exalt ourselves. We need to put ourselves out there. We need to let people know how valuable we are. We need to make sure that people thank us. We need to, shoot for the best and the brightest and to be on top. And Jesus says, no, if you want to be great, if you want to be honored, if you want to have a place of significance, then consider yourself less. play the role of the servant. Be the one who opens the door for others. Be who helps clean up. Be the one who plays the lesser role. Even if you are in a position of title and power and authority, you still play the role of the servant. And so this is the third countercultural idea in this message. And so, so far he's like, okay, in order to bear fruit, you need to die. Something needs to die. And, that we're supposed to hate our life. We're supposed to live for what comes after this life. And then honor comes through service. And so those are all super countercultural ideas. And so going on, verse 27, it says, "Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this cause came I unto this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then came there a voice from heaven saying, "I have both glorified it and will glorify it again." The people, therefore, that stood by and heard it said that it thundered. Others said, "An angel spake to him." Now, this is interesting because the same thing happens when the Apostle Paul, then Saul of Tarsus, there's a light that appears, and there's a voice saying, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And those who were with him, some of them, saw a light, some of them saw a personage, some of them heard thunder, some of them, actually heard a voice. And it's very similar to what is going on here. And so Jesus is saying, I'm troubled, and, that what should I say, Father, save me? But instead, Father, glorify your name. And then you have the voice that comes down from heaven. Now, this is the third time that we've heard a voice from heaven in reference to Jesus. There was the baptism by John, and then you have the transfiguration, and now you have a third time in which now this specific moment, Jesus needed that bit of encouragement, and so the voice of the Father from heaven, it says, I have both glorified my name, and I will glorify it again. And so some of them, they heard thunder, and that's it. Some of them heard a voice, but they said that's an angel that spoke with him. And then the apostles seemed to understand that this was the Father who was saying this, which of course it would have to be the message. If they heard the message, it would have to be the voice of God. Okay, and this just brings up an interesting thing, that sometimes we get lost in arguing, or having the best argument or answers to people's questions, or apologetics, or things of that nature. We think that we can persuade people into the kingdom of God, and the reality is that it is entirely a spiritual encounter between them and God. It's all of God. He's the one who is drawing them, and we're going to get to that in a moment. He's the one who's drawing them to himself. He's the one who's giving you the words to say. It's his word that you are bringing forth. It's his gospel. It's his salvation, his gift that he's offering to them. So the entire thing from start to finish is a supernatural, miraculous event that is all dependent upon the condition of the person's heart. When Jesus is drawing them, are they receptive to that? And what you have here is a clear separation. A supernatural event, and yet you have several people that are there, and some, all they hear is a natural phenomenon. That's all they see, that's all they hear, that's all there is to it. Some of them, it's a supernatural phenomenon, but they misidentify it or they interpret it wrongly. Why? Because that's what they wanted it to be. So often, that's really what it comes down to. You can have the exact same piece of evidence, and you have a bunch of people looking at that same piece of evidence, and they will all come to the conclusion that they want to come to. Most of the time, that's what I find, is that that's really all there is to it. That they come to the conclusion that they wanted to come to, that they came to it with. Okay? Very seldom, unless somebody wants their mind to be changed or is open to their mind to be changed or questions their own point of view, there is really nothing that you can do that's going to tip them over the edge. Okay? If Jesus is drawing them and they're receptive, then that's what's going to bring about that change. Going on to verse 30, Jesus answered and said, "The voice came not because of me, but for your sakes," talking to the apostles. And we heard him say a similar thing, when he raised Lazarus from the dead. He prayed beforehand, and he says, "Father, I'm not praying for my own sake or for your sake. I'm praying for the benefit of those who are hearing me," which we concluded was Martha, right? Martha, the sister of Lazarus. It's for her sake, and for those who are also listening to this, that is for their sake that I say these words and I'm praying. And so Jesus says, that voice that came from heaven, that wasn't for me. That wasn't for the benefit of all these people. That was for you guys. One more time, just to hear, okay, yeah, validated. This guy's talking about dying. He's talking about countercultural things. He's not going for the kingdom idea. And so that's exactly what's going on. That's what's, and so this guy's legit. This guy's for real. Okay? Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. And this he said, signifying what death he should die. So if it wasn't clear up until now, when he's talking about a grain of wheat going into the ground and dying and bearing much fruit, okay, that's clear. He's talking about dying. But now he's saying, if I be lifted up from the earth, and it says he's signifying what death he should die. And just like I was talking about the similar analogy of John chapter 3, that the cross is his exaltation. The cross, the humiliation of the cross is his exaltation, because that's the reason why he came. He came to die on a cross for our sins and to rise again from the dead, which he talks about, if I die, I will bear much fruit. And so, if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. And so this again brings out that truth that Jesus is the one who needs to draw people to himself. And he wants to draw all people to himself. This isn't a God who's just picking and choosing. We don't live by fate or destiny or any of those things. It is a choice that we have, but we do not fully have that choice. We, in and of ourselves, do not have the ability in our fallen, sinful nature to reach out to God. When he is drawing us, then we seek him. Then we question. Then we go to church. Then we open up the Bible. Then we get in conversations. Then we ask questions. Then that's when we encounter the truth. And then if we continue to receive that truth, and if then we are drawn in, then we become born again. And Jesus wants that to be true of all people. He wants to draw all men to himself. And this is another powerful principle. If we lift Jesus up, he will draw people. Again, the role of sharing our faith, the role of evangelism is not on us. It is completely and solely Him working through us as willing vessels. Just like, the person who is being taught the gospel needs to be receptive, and they need to receive the free gift of God's grace. So we, as Christians, as saved individuals, we need to be receptive to Him. We need to not do it in our own power, in our own strength, in our own way. We need to be doing it in His will, in His strength, in His power, and allowing Him to do it through us. And one of the ways we can do that is just by pointing constantly, giving Him the glory, lifting up Jesus. It's all about Jesus. That's what we're all about. And He says, if you do that, if you focus on lifting Him up, then He will draw people to Himself. Verse 34, the people answered Him, we have heard out of the law that Christ abides forever, and how do you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? So fair enough, that's what I brought out. Daniel, Son of Man, kingdom that's never going to end. How are you saying that He's going to be lifted up on a cross? Who is this Son of Man? Because He's not familiar to them, right? Who is this Son of Man? Again, show us Jesus. Who is Jesus? Another great seeker, God-fearer question. Who is Jesus? And as long as that person doesn't have a preconceived notion of who they think Jesus is or who they already know Jesus is, then that's a great open door for you to tell them, this is the Jesus I believe in. This is what it says about Him. This is what He taught. This is what He did. He died for our sins. He rose again from the dead, sharing the gospel with them, giving them a chance to receive eternal life. Then Jesus said unto them, yet a little while is the light with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walks in darkness knows not where he goes. While you have light, believe in the light, that you may be the children of light. These things spake Jesus, and departed, and did hide Himself from them. And so this is Jesus' clear call. Receive the gospel. Receive me. Receive this death that I'm speaking of for you. Receive it while it's still light. So for them, the difference between light and darkness is, He says, a little while you have the light with you. Now, that's a couple of different things. Jesus physically, He says, I'm going to physically die. I am the light of the world. I'm physically going to die, and then I'm rising again. I'm going to go back to heaven. So it's not much longer you have me with you. Receive me while I'm still here. But then secondly, He says to His believers, you are the light of the world. And so there's a period of time in which we are the light, and we are going to be in the world, but that time's not going to be forever. There's going to be a time in which He's going to come for His church, and we're going to be caught up just like He was, and then that light in the world is going to be gone, and that which hinders is going to be taken out of the way, and then the man of sin is going to be revealed, and hell on earth is literally going to be unleashed. And that's some of the things that we've been talking about in relation to the events preceding the second coming of Jesus. But then the third application of this is for us. We have an opportunity to live in that light, to receive that light, to be that light while it's still day. And He says, those who are in the darkness, they don't know where they're going. You're in the light. You know where you're going. You have the way. Shine that light. Let your light shine before men, that they might see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. For us, that period in which there's darkness is that period in which we are not promised tomorrow. We have today. So let's live for the moment. Let's live for Jesus Christ. And that's really going back. That's really what he's getting at. That this life should fade in comparison to the next life in your relationship with God to such an extent that it looks like hate. Your relationship with this life looks like hate because it is so insignificant and so less a priority for you that you are living each and every moment, each and every day for Jesus, for eternity, for the light. And you're living in the light, you're shining the light, you're being the light, you are children of the light. I just want to encourage you, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others and this channel with others. It helps every time you do that. It actually helps the channel out financially, and it helps us to grow and get in front of others. If you want to connect with us, we invite you to join the conversation, facebook.com/People of the Free Gift. And until next time, this is Jason from People of the Free Gift, signing off.